A lot of you already know this gentleman, Clay Sigg, because he is renowned in the real estate industry, and we have about 50% of our members that seem to be employed in the real estate industry. Clay and I actually started the real estate profession about the same time, and we bumped into each other, happily and unhappily. That means he cast the commission versus me not. But a couple of background information on his biography is that he played baseball at UC Davis, and unaware of me, he announced me that he's in the Baseball Hall of Fame at Davis. After graduation, he thought he would live the good life. He became a professional golf player, pro. After about 2 or 3 years, he got hungry, and he decided he had to go into business to start making money. That's when he entered the real estate profession. He's been in the real estate industry for 41 years. He was an independent broker in several offices, was very successful, and after that period of time, he entered the management profession. He is now with Coldwell Banker on Sunrise, a very large, successful office. Prior to that, he was with Lion Real Estate in another very successful office. The other thing I'd also like to share is that him and I are brothers in a very tight-knit group. We are brothers in faith and in Christ. And now he is a renowned author, and with his background in sports, particularly baseball, he has authored a baseball publication that's historical in nature, which he will give details to you about. And so would you please welcome Clay Sigg.
Thank you, Buzz. How many people in the audience noticed what happened with the Chicago Cubs last year?
One or two.
What happened with the Chicago Cubs?
World Series, baby.
Yeah. 1908 was the last year that the Chicago Cubs were World Series champions. And the passion that city had, it was so cathartic, I couldn't believe it. There was, I believe there were in excess of 5 million people who showed up for the party afterwards. And that is, I believe, the most people in one spot in history because of a baseball game. So there's some passionate people who really love the game of baseball, and they were focused in Chicago. And I'm one of those passionate baseball people. And my book is a celebration of the single franchise baseball stars of the 20th century. And it performs as a history of Major League Baseball in the 20th century because of the features that I have for each of these individual players. The book features, out of 18,000 Major League players in the 20th century, there were only 177 men who played only for one team and one team only. In other words, one franchise exclusively. And so it's a pretty rare feat, and it's becoming more and more rare, but it's essentially a celebration of these players and their careers. So the book is a pretty large book. It's about 400-page book. It weighs 7 pounds. So it's by the pound. And of these 18,000 men who wore the uniform, 177 are featured in this book. 51 of those members of this rare fraternity are Major League Hall of Famers, National Baseball Hall of Fame. And so my book emanated out of a desire to tribute these people, these quality players. And it turned out through the thousands of hours of research to put this book together that a pattern seemed to exist, and turned out that these players were very special in many ways. Every single one of them is not only a quality human being, but obviously great players as well. And if you think about it, being able to play for one team and one team only without being traded, without being released, without causing some sort of trouble in the clubhouse, it turned out that after this research, it really was a rare thing that is very difficult to do. And there was some uniformity in who these players were. They were not only some of the most influential and beloved players, most popular players in the history of the game of baseball, but there are reasons for that. They had qualities that they were very loyal people. They were not only exceptional on the field, but they were respected, even revered by the fans. And they were high quality people, good teammates, and very popular. They were long-term valued by management, and they were all good teammates. And they, for the most part, were also good with the press and with the media. So they were just good people overall. And in the course of my research, I found out that many of them, most of them, stayed in their adopted hometown and became philanthropists and community. They were very good with their community. Some of them became pastors. They were community leaders. Yeah. So, if you have you been to the National Baseball Hall of Fame? Anybody in the room been to the National Baseball Hall of Fame? In the foyer there, you'll notice there are 3 statues, and those statues are statues of Lou Gehrig, Jackie Robinson, and Roberto Clemente. And all 3 of these individuals are highlighted and attributed in my book. They're all single franchise players. The single franchise player, remarkably, there was some pretty consistent throughout these decades. The chapters, there are several chapters: the dead ball era, the Roaring '20s, the Depression era. How many people have seen Lou Gehrig play in the audience? Do you have anybody? You'd have to be in your 90s, I think, too. No? Okay. I actually had somebody who said, yeah, I saw Lou Gehrig play. The golden era, after World War II, the expansion era, and the free agency era, and then finally the steroids era. And my son said, Dad, you can't call it the steroids era. But I did, because it was. Although these players who were in the steroids era, none of them took steroids, because they were high quality individuals and they did it on their own. So without the help of performance enhancing drugs, a la Barry Bonds. Hope I don't offend any Giants fans, but not my favorite player. There were a lot of players in the book. We're starting out with Mr. Cub.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are. There are a lot of misters in this book. Mr. Cub would be Ernie Banks. He has a statue. He has a statue in outside of Wrigley Field. There's the statue. We have Mr. Padre down in San Diego, Tony Gwynn. He has his statue outside that stadium. These guys are revered in their hometowns. We have Mr. Royal, George Brett, who has his statue at Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City, along with Frank White, who I had the honor of having breakfast with in Kansas City at Denny's restaurant one morning for 3 hours. Mr. Tiger, Al Kaline. Anybody from Detroit here? Well, Mike, you remember, well, I don't know, are you a baseball fan?
I am.
Okay, Al Kaline, Mr. Tiger, revered in the city of Detroit. He could be elected mayor to this day. And he has his statue along with Charlie Gehringer. Mr. Cardinal, Stan the Man Musial in St. Louis. And Stan Musial, they weren't content with just one statue in St. Louis. They gave him 2 statues outside the stadium. So that's the only time I'm aware of a gentleman's been given 2 statues out of the stadium, along with Bob Gibson. Mr. Brewer up in Milwaukee, Robin Yount. He has his statue out in front of that stadium. Mr. Oriole, who is Cal Ripken Jr., the streaker, if you know what I mean. He has his statue outside of Camden Yards, along with Brooke Robinson and Jim Palmer. Mr. Mariner, Edgar Martinez had a street named after him right near Safeco Field in Seattle. Mr. Rocky, that would be Todd Helton, future Hall of Famer. And PNC Park, I've seen all the parks in the major leagues, all 30 of them, and I think my favorite new park is PNC Park in Pittsburgh. And outside that park, there are 4 statues. All of these gentlemen are featured in my book. Hannes Wagner, Roberto Clemente, Willie Stargell, and Bill Mazeroski, all Pittsburgh favorites for sure. There they are. In Target Field up in Minneapolis, they have Kirby Puckett, Tony Oliva, and Kurt Herbeck. They all have statues there. And in fact, they've named gates out. Gate number 6 is Tony Oliva. Gate number 14 is where the statue is of Herbeck, and then Kirby Puckett has his own gate. Gate number 34 out there in Target Field in Minneapolis. So, and here's Mike Schmidt, probably the best third baseman package in the history of baseball in Philadelphia. He's got his huge statue there. He's actually standing near it. You can see how big the statue is. Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati. Johnny Bench has his statue there. One of the best catchers in history. So we have Giants fans in the audience? Probably more Giants fans than Dodger fans, I would suspect. Yeah? Okay. My father grew up in Queens. He was a Giant fan, and he grew up with Carl Hubble and Hal Schumacher, Bill Terry, Mel Ott, Travis Jackson, all Hall of Famers in the 30s. And now the Giants with Jimmy Davenport and Scott Garrels and Robbie Thompson, if you remember him. And the Brooklyn and Los Angeles Dodgers have a lot of the boys of summer. If you've heard that, if you've read that book, it's a famous book by Roger Kahn. A lot of these people were Brooklyn Dodgers in the 1950s, including Jackie Robinson and Pee Wee Reese. The 2 best, probably lefty-righty combination of starting pitchers in history, certainly arguable. Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale are both in the book. A lot of Red Sox. Do we have any Boston Red Sox people in the audience? No? Too far away? Okay. Somebody said they were going to go see Fenway Park for the first time. Who was that I was talking to? No. Anyway, Ted Williams. I think this is pretty interesting. The left fielder there's a green monster in Fenway Park, the left field wall there. And from 1939 until 1996, the left fielder who was guarding that wall was a single franchise Red Sox. It started out with Ted Williams and then gravitated toward Carl Yastrzemski, and then Jim Rice took over, and then Mike Greenwell followed up. All of them played exclusively for the Red Sox, which tells you something about the franchise. There are more Yankees that were single franchise players than any team by about double. And you can read, probably can't read that very well, it's probably pretty small print, but there were a lot of these Yankees who could have retired with another team. I can think of Don Mattingly, Bernie Williams, Jorge Posada, Joe Collins, Gil McDougall, Phil Rizzuto. A lot of these players could have played for another team, but they decided to retire because they wanted to be Yankees for life. Here's some of the ones there: Ron Goodry, Thurman Munson, Derek Jeter. Yankee center fielders the same way. Earl Coon started in the 20s, and Mickey Mantle took over for Joe DiMaggio and retired in 1968. There were 45 consecutive years where the New York Yankee marquee center fielder was a single franchise Yankee. None of these three guys ever played for another team. And then these recent cornerstones, like Mariano Rivera, Derek Jeter, Jorge Posada, Bernie Williams, they're all Yankees for life. The shortstops for the Red Sox, for the Cincinnati Reds, Davey Concepcion and Barry Larkin were both, for 35 years in a row, their shortstop with the Reds, never played for another franchise. Famous double play combinations: Bill Mazeroski and Gene Alley, and then Alan Trammell and Lou Whitaker back in the back row there, Mike. It's a famous combination for the Detroit Tigers. Captains of the Red Sox: Yaz and Jim Rice and Jason Varitek in recent years. And for some reason, a lot of third basemen are in this book. Apparently, if you find a good third baseman, you don't trade him off or release him. These guys are all fantastic third basemen. Most of them Hall of Famers, including Stan Hack, who's a Sacramento native. Roommate and teammate and friend, these two gentlemen, Clyde Millen and Walter Big Train Johnson, were recruited to be signed by the Washington Nationals in the same scouting trip, and they were signed, and then they were teammates together for 17 years in a row. They were also roommates, hunting buddies, and lifetime friends. During my research, I found some people that are pretty esoteric, I guess you'd say, that maybe aren't as well known as others. And this gentleman, Cecil Travis, was a shortstop with the Washington Nationals. And in 1941, the famous year where Ted Williams hit 406 and Joe DiMaggio had his 56-game hitting streak, Cecil Travis actually had a higher batting average than Joe DiMaggio that year. Have you ever heard of him? Never heard of him. The reason you've never heard of him is because after the 1941 season, he volunteered for World War II and saw combat. He was one of the battling bastards of Bastogne, the Battle of the Bulge, and he froze. His feet froze, and although they were saved, he came back and he was never the same player. So he basically gave up a Hall of Fame career. He would have been a Hall of Fame player if he would have been able to continue on the way he was. So a high quality, just a great man. Never complained about it, and was very popular even afterwards. Both of these legendary streakers, and that's not what you, ladies, that's not what you think. What I mean by streaker is both of these gentlemen had long consecutive game streaks. First Lou Gehrig, 2,130 games, and then Cal Ripken smoked him way many years later. Both high quality, let's go to work guys. Bob Feller and Joe DiMaggio. This picture is an interesting picture because this is a no-hitter that was pitched by Bob Feller in 1946, and the hitter in this photograph, which I got from the Library of Congress, is Joe DiMaggio, and the umpire is Eddie Rommel, who also happens to be in my book. He ended up being after he pitched for the Tigers, he became a major league umpire. There was some tragedy that I discovered in the book. These two gentlemen, one is Addie Joss. He is a Hall of Fame pitcher in the dead ball era. He died of meningitis just before his 10th season. And Ray Chapman on the right is the only player to ever die from being hit by a pitch ball. That was before they discovered helmets. So to this day, the only gentleman to ever die because of that batted ball. The Houston Astros, Jeff Bagwell, was just picked this year for the Hall of Fame, as well as his teammate Craig Biggio. They played together for almost 2 decades. And yet there are 5 teams that never had a single franchise player, not once in their entire history of their franchise, which the Texas Rangers started as the 1961 Washington Nationals, and in all that time, what's that, 57 years, they've never had one player who's played exclusively for them, that might be an indication of why they've never won a World Series. They don't have much stability, apparently. There were these many players who played at least 20 years with one team, and this, you probably can't read these. These are almost all Hall of Fame players. If you can play for one team for 20 years, that's quite an accomplishment. In baseball, you can play longer than you can in the NFL because you're still basically in one piece after 20 years, most of them. But these are all spectacularly successful players who are all good guys. The tie for the most years played by a single franchise player is between Carl Yastrzemski of the Boston Red Sox, who again could be the mayor of Boston if he wanted to be, and Brooks Robinson of the Baltimore Orioles. So this is an original painting that was done by Bill Purdom, who recently passed away, by the way, even though my book was just published last year. All of the single franchise baseball stars who are in the Hall of Fame. And so it's a beautiful piece of art that really depicts these guys in the very best light. And I'm just very impressed with it. I think he really did a great job. So that's my book, and it was a 12-year project, and I really enjoyed it. It was a bit of a labor of love, but it's available if you'd like to buy a copy. I have it over there. So, thank you.